So kia ora everyone, welcome to our third International Development Young Professionals online digital event called Exploring the Sector. I think first things first, congratulations to everyone on level 1. I think that's a big week. Well done. I mean, level 2 has felt like level 1 for a while, I guess, but anyway, I mean, we've come a long way, I think, so it's big congratulations and acknowledgement of that. So in this workshop, we're going to discuss and showcase a number of development professionals as we draw on their insights and expertise within the development sector. We're going to discuss each expert's pathway into development, their particular role and responsibilities within the development world, and how they developed their skill set and how you can potentially begin to develop their skill set. We're going to make this a very interactive sort of workshop. It's not going to be a presentation from IDYP staff. So any questions anyone has throughout the night or evening, type it in chat. Or I believe there's a raise your hand function, which you can also click on at the bottom. But anyway, just type a question in chat and we'll ask them to the panelists throughout the night. So I'm Matt Fowler. I'm the Events Co-Chair with IDYP, and I'll be the facilitator. Alongside me will be the membership Co-Chair, Jade, as well as other IDYP members. We've got Danielle, the Chair, and Elena. There we are. And anyone else? I think that's just the four.
Hi everyone.
Four of our team. So that's IDYP team.
Hey guys.
Here we are. And just before we get into the discussion and the questions we'll be asking the panelists, I just want to highlight a few upcoming events and opportunities within the IDYP world. Actually, before that, we'll just say this event's been recorded and it's going to be put on our YouTube channel. So yes, IDYP, I'm not sure if everyone's a member here, but IDYP network is a reliable leader in the community through which international development young professionals can build their network, skills and knowledge in order to contribute to the continued strength of New Zealand's international development community. You can join us on idyp.org.nz. We'll put these links in the comment section as well. We can link those in the comment section. So idyp.org.nz/join. Is the poll results. The second of a next big event coming up in September is our AGM on the 24th of September. And alongside this AGM, we're going to be hosting a TEDx style talk. We did it last year at our AGM and it was quite a big success. These TEDx talks are going to be around 10 minutes in duration, and you can focus on anything within the development sector sphere. And we just want any members, anyone related to international development and IDYP, just to submit a pitching idea to our email, and we'll link all this information in the chat as well. But yeah, the AGM we host is a really good event for networking anyway, but last year we had the CEO of Oxfam and people from MFAT, people from Plant and Research. We had some really high up development professionals. So it's a really good networking opportunity and way to get your ideas and your voice out there in the development sector. So it's the TEDx style talks will be a really good opportunity just for anyone within the sector. And what else? At the AGM, we're also going to be a number of board positions will be up for renewal. So I'll just get Jade quickly to talk about what this process is at the AGM and her experiences on the board of IDYP. That's all right. You're just muted, Jade.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I have been with IDYP since its beginning. Danielle has been our strong and faithful leader since day one. So it's been a really cool opportunity. I think the coolest thing for me being on the board is just seeing the variety of backgrounds that people involved in the sector come from and the variety of perspectives, and just it's just been really rich in that sense. Really cool to meet lots of people from different backgrounds, different interests, all really passionate about international development. It's a really fun kind of like side gig as well. Like it's really awesome working alongside other members of our board. We usually have kind of a board meeting, say once every 2 months, and it's like a 2-hour catch up, and we plan like upcoming events, and we touch base on just kind of running the network. And it's it's really cool. Like it doesn't take heaps of your time, but can take as much time as you'd like it to take. But yeah, really keen to have some new blood on board as well. Matt's quite a new recruit, and maybe you can comment on how you found it, Matt. But a couple of roles will be up for election at the upcoming AGM. So if you're interested, really happy to answer any of your questions. Just flick any of us an email or contact us through the website. But yeah, that's probably all I have to say on that.
Yeah, no, all good. Yep, thanks, Jade. And the last point, we really value all the feedback we can get. So we'll link again the feedback part on our website that you can provide feedback for after this this digital online event. But we really do appreciate all your feedback. It will help us sort of direct the next online events we host, or just events in the future. And I think that's all the sort of housekeeping sort of stuff with IDYP and who we are. So I guess a bit about myself. When thinking of the development sector and how what roles and responsibilities and what areas make it up, it's such a multifaceted and big sector. And myself, I've only sort of within recently broken into the sector, I would kind of say, but I've only been in the sector for maybe a year or two in New Zealand, but my journey into the sector has been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in the making. And so it's a sector that really, it takes a lot of, for my journey, it was a lot of time and effort. And I did volunteering, I did community-based organizing, I did internships. And so there's a breadth of and range of experiences that development professionals have undertaken to get into the sector. So it's a good opportunity to touch upon with a range of different experts within the development field, get their stories and experiences and how they got into the sector, as well as things and sort of opportunities we should keep in mind to continue to develop our skill sets within the sector. So without me actually introducing them directly, I will proposition the first question, and we'll go in order of, so the 4 panelists are Carl, Sophie, Nora, and Fran. Oh. And so first question, in 5 minutes, tell us about your current organization or the most recent area of work or assignment you've had, and the roles and responsibilities of your current job. And we can start with Carl.
Everyone, good to be here. It's the first event that I've attended, so thanks, Matt, for the introduction. That's really good to know more about the organization and to meet all of you here. Some of you I know already from where our paths have crossed in the past. I'm currently based in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, where I am at the moment, and have been in lockdown since the same time as New Zealand entered lockdown, but that's continuing here. So it feels like a long time staying inside. But overall, I'm here for the Rohingya refugee response. As a quick rundown on that, Rohingya refugees en masse entered Bangladesh in September 2017. And since then, there's been a large-scale humanitarian response to the refugee camp setting where they're now residing. And there have been different waves of Rohingya who have come into Bangladesh from neighboring Myanmar in the past. And so my role with the team here is as country director. We're working as an emergency response organization across the areas of health, running primary health care across 2 health posts in the camps. Also nutrition services for malnourished children. So that's for basic supplementary feeding, as well as for moderately and severely malnourished children, and also shelter improvements and repairs for the makeshift bamboo shelters that people are living in there. So prior to being in Bangladesh, I had been with the earthquake response in Nepal for a couple of years with the same organization. And I spent around 6 months in Indonesia with the earthquake response there in Sulawesi in 2018. Before all of that, I was with Tier Fund in New Zealand for about 5 years. So I've overall been in the sector around 8 or 9 years. And through that time, I did my studies as well at Massey and at Auckland Uni. So it was really good to be able to study part-time as well as getting experience as an intern and then as a staff member. So I think, have I touched on the questions, or is there any other thing I've missed?
No, that's good. Yep, no, that's good.
Okay.
for an introduction. We'll go to Fran.
We're 3 on the list now.
Sorry.
That's okay. Well, I work for plant and food research like Danielle. I'm a researcher. I'm trained in post-harvest physiology. And well, if the question was how intentional it was to get into international development, it wasn't. It kind of just happened to be the path I took because the job came along that sounded very interesting, but I had no prior experience in international development. I never worked towards working in international development, but it seemed like a very good opportunity and a great field to work in. And yeah, plant and food does a lot of work internationally, so we have good chances to do that. I feel like I didn't touch on all your questions, but.
I guess just give us a current highlight of the roles and responsibilities you have in terms of within your current organization.
Current highlight, I work on 3 projects. 2 are in Southeast Asia. 1 is in Vietnam, 1 in Cambodia. We work on safe vegetables over there. So the project really focuses on everything from planting material to field preparation. And my area is more in packaging and marketing of produce. And we're trying to train people to handle vegetables appropriately and make them food safe. Found a lot of problems in Southeast Asia with contamination of all great things that you do not want on vegetables eaten raw. So we're trying to work that out. And on a project in Tonga on vanilla, but because of COVID, I haven't actually yet done anything in Tonga. I have never been there. Haven't had the pleasure yet. Was supposed to go. But yeah, we're stuck in Australia at the moment, so not going anywhere anytime soon. And we are not in level 1 yet because we're going somehow the other way. We started at level 1 and we're going towards level 4, I think. So we're doing everything opposite because we can't possibly do the same thing as New Zealand. So it's very confusing when people say we're at level 1 now. And I'm like, wait, no, I thought we're level 3. But, just different country, different numbering systems, I suppose.
Thank you. Go to Sophie.
Awesome. So I am currently unemployed, but I was, I know Carl through Tier Fund, so I was there for 4 years. And then I just came back in time for lockdown, doing a 6-month internship in communications at a local organization in Israel, Palestine, who do reconciliation work. So yeah, I'm about to actually head into further study. So I'm just in this limbo phase for another few weeks before what's next comes. Quick question. This is my first, what is it? What's the acronym? IDYP?
IDYP, yep.
Am I the only marketing person here? Just to quick.
Oh yeah, good. Raise your hands. Has everyone got their cameras on? Anyone else within marketing sphere of international development?
Cool. Okay, there's an ish. Awesome. Well, yeah, I guess for me it's a real honor to be here because I feel like I've always had a bit of a fangirl thing going for our programs people and development. So yeah, my space is communications for development. So yeah, at Tier Fund, International Aid and Development Organisation, who works through local partners. Yeah, I was there for almost 4 years. What was my role there was media communications, and then I headed into digital marketing. So I kind of covered social media for Tier Fund and for events that we ran as well, like Live Below the Line and the Justice Conference, and Poverty Cycle was another fundraiser we did. I also did the emails, so all of the emails that ran alongside our campaigns through MailChimp. I was fortunate to go visit 2 of our local partners and do interviews and hear stories from our partner staff and people that they work with in the communities, which was amazing in the Philippines and India. What else did I do there? I co-launched the blog that we got going and kind of facilitated different people writing on the blog and wrote blogs myself. And I also facilitated this initiative called the Cause Champs. And basically the idea with that was buddying up a marketing person with a programs person and simply creating a space kind of once a month roughly for corridor between the two and kind of trying to cross the void between marketing and programs. And the idea with that was that it would enrich our marketing with development knowledge and stories. So yeah, so it's kind of that really. At Musalaha, so that means reconcile in Arabic. It's run by a Palestinian guy, but it's kind of co-led with Israelis and Palestinians. And they, yeah, it's a grassroots approach, I guess, to the endeavour for peace in a fairly, well, absolutely intractable conflict. So yeah, I learned a lot there and was doing kind of similar stuff at Musalaha. But I was thinking about it, those are like roles and responsibilities, but also as a marketing person, I feel like my core responsibilities that I found really important were, for me, putting the program participants or co-creators first in the way that we tell stories, which I know isn't always the way people think in marketing, but to me that was really important. Also, yeah, to tell stories that motivate social change for New Zealanders or for our audiences, but also to do that in a way that is dignifying of both the program participants and co-creators and of New Zealanders here, because I kind of believe that when we dehumanize other people, we also dehumanize ourselves. So there's this kind of thing with telling stories that, yeah, are nuanced and trying to educate people in New Zealand and our audiences through marketing of, you know, the social and economic and environmental issues within the communities that we're working with overseas. Yeah, and in a way that is dignifying of the people themselves, of the wider context that these communities are part of. And yeah, I think it also dignifies New Zealanders in hearing a more complex and nuanced story. I think, I don't know, I feel like we need to give a bit more credit to our audiences as well in telling kind of more complex stories, but that dignify both the audience and the people that we work with overseas. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, awesome. No, thanks. Yeah, no. Yeah, obviously ethical, responsible storytelling in this day and age is massive. And I think just before giving it to you, Nora, I just want to give a big shout out to Farhan from Somaliland. Just talking in chat there. So thanks for joining us, Farhan. That's great. And I'll give you a double-barreled question, Nora, just based on Lauren's question in the chat. Because I know you're currently studying your master's, I believe, or you're back at university studying a master's?
Yeah, I did a master's degree. I finished at 2016 in geography, and now I wanted to kind of frame my technical focus and be a bit more specific with my degree. So I just recently started.
Okay, so I'll ask in terms of, give us a background about who you are and your current role and everything in your current organization, as well as within your studies, what sort of value and insights can you give us into directing your studies to an international development related sphere? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I hope I got it right. Okay, well, hi everyone. I'm Nora Jukic, and I'm coming from a private sector. I work in the past I did my internship for Finnish government in South Africa, and I work for several NGOs, but at the moment I'm at the private sector. So it's a consulting company, FCG New Zealand, and we are based here in Auckland. And we deliver projects for UNDP, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, New Zealand MFAT, World Bank. So they are basically our clients. So we are delivering projects in Asia and the Pacific in the sectors of agriculture, water resources management, disaster risk management, coastal protection, and climate change adaptation. So we have a quite large range of different type of projects that we work on. And our team here in Auckland, we basically do the project management. We also do some expert work, like myself, I had a chance last year to work on a disaster risk management project. And one of my colleagues is an environmental safeguarding expert. So she does a lot of technical work herself, but majority of our work is actually managing international team of experts. And we find experts all around the world. So sometimes we work with, at the same time, from people from New Zealand, Mauritius, and United USA. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to merge time zones in some of the meetings. But yeah, so it's quite a large range of different things that we are doing. And myself, I'm managing a project at the moment in Mauritius. It's about integrated coastal zone management. So we are mapping some environmentally sensitive areas in Mauritius, updating the data maps related to those, and making plans how to sustainably manage those areas. And that's what I'm doing. I'm working with the small group of international experts. So I'm making sure that they are using their inputs as they should, and they are spending their time in the technical work. So I'm taking more of the administrative role and managing the client relationship and quality assuring their reports. And then in some other projects like this disaster risk management evaluation that I did last year, then I can, because it's more in my field of expertise, so I actually had a chance to do data collection in 4 different Pacific islands. So I ran a few workshops. There were evaluation. It was an evaluation project. So yeah, that's what I do, but that's part of the job. Big part of my job is also winning new projects, and that's partly, I could say, also marketing. So that's the sales word that is sometimes found a bit dirty in this sector. So yeah, I'm doing selling as part of my work. I'm selling expertise to World Bank and IDYP, for example, one could say. So basically they are tendering out projects that, let's say they need technical assistance with modernizing agriculture in Sri Lanka. So we send a tender, we put together a proposal, we find the right people who can do it, we put together approach and methodology, how we're gonna do it, and then they're gonna score how they think that our team did, and then there are a lot of other companies who are also bidding. And if we win, then we will go to the field and implement the project. And sometimes it's not only project implementation. Sometimes it is evaluation. Sometimes it is preparing a project. So a lot of different type of work. But yeah, I maybe quickly about the studying. So I studied my bachelor in geography and master's in human geography. So I don't know if people here are very familiar about what is geography, but it's quite holistic science. So I focused on development studies under geography and a lot of sustainability and livelihood issues, but it was quite broad. So that's why I decided to do now later, or when I was quite confident that DRM is the type of work that I want to be doing as a technical expert. So now when I got my residency, I decided that it's time to continue studying part-time, and I'm lucky enough that my employer has allowed me to keep studying and study like a few days, like basically 1 day per week. So yeah, one could say like it's quite good for me since I'm working, so I can really directly take everything I'm learning every day at my courses to my work. But there's also part of it that I'm doing it for the title, that I have a specific technical expertise in my education title, because having a master's of geography, people don't know what it is. And I've had this conversation so many times that I need to convince that it is an actual degree. I'm not just studying what type of capitals we have in this world, which is often the impression. But yeah, I don't know if I answered at all. So
no, that's really interesting. And that's a current, I mean, IDYP has a lot of, I think at these the last couple of digital events we've had, there's been a lot of younger people, students wanting to get into international development. And obviously within any sector, you always start with your studies, and you start with where do you think that can actually end up taking you. And myself, I did political science, and then I did a one-year diploma in international in development studies at Victoria in Wellington. And even after my one-year diploma, I was sort of still like, where do I fit in the development sector? What am I? Don't have a hard skill. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist like Fran. You know, I kind of don't have a hard skill that I feel confident. So the sort of breaking down the study sphere of international development and sort of social sciences, and actually providing good insights into, if you're now saying maybe your master's degree, so would you say it has translated into employable opportunities, a master's of geography?
Yeah, but also partly since I worked really hard throughout my studies. I did several internships, and I did part-time job for Plan International for all the 6 years that I studied. So that's, I don't think, also in Finland, that's by the way where I'm from, if you're confused with the weird accent. So I'm from Finland. I've been here for the past 3 years. So in Finland, when you start to study your bachelor degree, you are automatically given a chance to study your master's. So people usually study bachelor and master's right away, like they don't have a gap year in between. So I think the people who never worked next to their studies or didn't do their internships, I think suddenly being 25 with a master's degree, no experience, the degree didn't give them anything on its own. Exactly. There are enough people.
And that's something I've definitely come across with my studies. I did the first year diploma in my my development studies degree, and then I had the opportunity to do a master's or take a practical year, and I sort of took a practical year, did an assignment for a year in PNG in Papua New Guinea, and I was able to use all my practical theoretical skills in the field. Throwing it over to you, Carl, because I know you studied a master's in development studies in Auckland. Looking at your studies and your master's degree, could you just provide any insights into the employability that provided, or what you felt you had to develop alongside your studies to get where you are?
Well, I think one of the really good things was being able to study part-time and work part-time as well, to have those skill sets developing side by side. Because, I do think that it's a real challenge. You know, there are a lot of graduates out of university, but it's studying international development doesn't really give you that hard skill set that many employers are looking for. And many of the technical sectors, which tend to come up quite often, it's, you know, whether if you're an M&E expert, then they're looking for sort of statistics or maybe a public health type background, or be it engineering or some kind of medical clinical background. So coming from an international development perspective, where do those skills align? Because there's a lot of skills which get taught in a course, but I've also seen, just reflecting on different people I've worked with and who have been trying to come into the sector along the way, is that, you know, we learn a lot of great things on how to see problems and how to think critically. But depending on the role that you go into, if it's managing a project, there are some practical skills like project cycle management, which are actually not really covered very much within an international development course. Other areas like, you know, you can be implementing a project and be very good at the practical aspect of that, but then you also have to manage the budget for that. And if you don't manage a budget and cash flow wisely for a project, you can end up undermining a lot of the good work that you're doing. Other areas which I think are kind of complementary skill sets that can go alongside it. So, you know, things like finance can be useful, knowing, you know, your way around Excel, project cycle management, but also a lot of the work does involve, and people have talked about it before, sort of the dirty word of fundraising or marketing, but I think grant acquisition is a huge part of the sector that we're in. And so knowing how to write proposals and being, when you have strong writing skills, often that's, at least it was for me, that's kind of the way I got into this sector, because knowing how to write, how to prepare a proposal for an institutional donor is a skill set that a lot of field-based people actually tend to not have, and is in quite high demand. So those are a few areas where I think that there's some complementary skills that can come into it. For other people, I've seen many who have come from maybe an engineering or a nursing background and then gone to study their masters in international development, and that is a really nice complementary skill set, because you do bring a technical expertise alongside a generalist field, and you can kind of go either way with it as well. Those for me.
Yeah, good. I mean, that was the kind of, as I sort of mentioned earlier, the dilemma I faced, I suppose, was I had some really good study and experience behind me, but in terms of the hard skill or the niche you can sort of carve out yourself within the development sector, it took me a while to find that. And I will say, I mean, yeah, adding on to complementary skills, it's becoming, I think aid in development is becoming a donor-driven environment more than ever. And skills like monitoring and evaluation and data analysis, those sorts of skills, it may not be your primary focus within development, but I would say from what I've sort of seen within New Zealand, those sort of that data analysis skill and being able to collect and analyze data from the field is a really valuable skill, just to have alongside maybe your project cycle management or sort of your fundraising, just to actually be able to provide that extra impetus within your organization and be able to for people to draw on your skill set for that. I guess, Fran, sorry, I'm not sure if I heard what your studies were, but so did you study as primarily as a scientist?
Yeah, I have the classic European education, I guess. I did a similar program to Nora. I did a bachelor master program, 5 years at a German university, and I got quite lucky to be at the right time, at the right spot, and scoring a PhD scholarship in the US by just being, kind of in the off season when everybody else had finished and they had a scholarship lying around. So that was really good.
So I guess being a bit different than the other panelists and having the hard skill and then pivoting into the development sphere, how did you sort of choose that, and what motivated you to actually go from the scientist skills to then applying those in the international development arena?
Well, we still mostly do sciencey stuff, I think. We apply a lot of the science skills to the development world, I guess. And as I said before, it wasn't a conscious choice necessarily, so I didn't plan to be in international development. But before I got into international development, between my PhD and getting this job, I did like 40 different contracts with the university in Adelaide over 4 years. So I've just learned that if I set my mind to it, I can do whatever I have to. So if you tell me I have to do a certain task, I'll figure it out and I'll do it. And I think that just gave me, flexibility in thinking outside the box of things I've learned before, and just learn to interact with lots of different people by teaching. And we have a lot of students from outside Australia over here, a lot of them not very good English skills. So you learn how to communicate on a non-verbal base somehow and get your point across. So I think that's very helpful. But otherwise, nothing was planned to go towards.
And how would you say, and how do you think that getting into international development through a sort of non-traditional route has impacted your experience within the sphere?
Well, I had no preconceived notions, so I was quite open to do whatever had to be done. I guess I'll just take it like a job. I guess I go to the field and do what I have to do, and I'll try to do the best I can. I don't know how to describe it any better.
No.
I don't have to do much project management yet, so that's good. I'm just still the small person in the project, so that makes it a lot easier. But hopefully someday I'll get my own project, and then I'll have to do all the management stuff. But
all the fun, writing reports and monitoring and gathering data. It is fun, yeah, definitely. I guess actually myself, I'm at the Leprosy Mission New Zealand, and I'm a programs officer. So I'm helping support programs in Asia Pacific, primarily Papua New Guinea, Bougainville, Nepal, Indonesia. And currently I'm going through, our organization is going through the negotiated partnerships funding round. within MFAT, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So it's the current big funding stream that MFAT provides. And it's for me, and what I knew at the start of it and what I know now, the skills that you can bring to international development, things like report writing, data gathering or data analysis, monitoring skills. What else has been useful? Just cross-cultural experience. I've lived in Papua New Guinea for a year. I lived in PNG for a year and a half, and having that contextual analysis skills and contextual basis, living in a place like that has helped me immensely. So I guess as we see a range of experience within academia, it's sort of, you always want to, as I think Nora said, you always want to supplement your academic skills with real world experience. Otherwise, you have to sort of ground your academic experiences, and for them to sort of, for you to grow as a person as well, I guess. And I guess, Sophie, as you're going back into studies, what has sort of motivated you to really push back into studies? In the development sector as well.
Do you want to talk about those poll results? They just popped up. I don't know if that was a thing.
Oh, no, that's all right. No, yeah, you go for it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no.
So yeah, I'm not going back to doing further development studies, but I'm going back actually, I guess, to continue developing, my knowledge around storytelling. So I want to look at the role, I'm hoping if I get to my master's, because first I need to do finish a grad dip, then do honours dissertation, and then, but anyway, the trajectory is there, of the role of storytelling within the political and actually theological discourse of reconciliation in New Zealand. So for me, my path has still got storytelling at the core of it, but it's taking a slightly different direction, maybe actually from development. But I guess it's still looking at development or aspects maybe socially within our own local context here. But yeah, for me, I can't get away from the fact that I feel like stories are, are powerful at creating change and social change. And so, I'm wanting to just develop my knowledge in the role that they have within reconciliation, particularly within New Zealand's bicultural journey. So not super international development related, but still storytelling.
Does any of the other, just reading the comments. Any of the panelists have any other insights into how you feel the academic experience has now translated into your development career, or any sort of academic insights into what skill sets you personally felt were useful to then develop within international development? I guess, Carl, going back to your, Nora, I see you unmuted.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I wanted to say that maybe I didn't highlight enough that obviously degree is a useful thing that you have studied for years and have all this knowledge in your head. I don't want to sound at all discouraging when I said I don't know if I did actually with the degree much, but it's more the skill, not the actual information that I learned. It's the skill of learning to process the information. I understand where can I search for the information? I don't need to remember the details. I just have the understanding, I guess, that I need those details in my work, and understanding those processes and linkages between different topics. So I guess that's a skill that everybody gets when they are studying, and the more they are studying and doing research, just processing information and putting bits and pieces together. And that goes, I was nodding a lot when Carla was talking. I couldn't agree more with the reporting skills, and you don't need to learn them in development sector. You can learn them in some completely other sector about proposal writing, but you can just apply that knowledge and that skill in the development sector. And one thing that I was thinking about my studies, I was really active in different associations, like what IDYP is. I was establishing a new whole association, European Geography Association in my city. And I think those skills were also something that they were not probably part of my studies, but I did them because I studied what I did. And that's where I probably learned more about project management. What does it mean to put budget together? How long does it take to get 100 people in the same room and manage that event? And so all those skills as well, like everybody who's sitting here and who's doing this next to their studies, I think this is, everybody keeps talking about the networking and how important it is, but it actually, I would consider all these things and the kind of the side actions next to studies as very, very crucial.
And that's definitely kind of what I found. I mean, my journey into international development, I for some reason, I had international development in my mind when I first went to university when I was 18, and I thought, I want to work for NGOs, INGOs, but I didn't kind of have any plan of how to get from point A to point B in terms of actually becoming a development practitioner. I didn't even know what that meant for myself. So I think as a lot of what everyone has been saying, it really is just a journey of sort of self-discovery, I guess, in a sense, and finding out where you fit, what you like, what you want to do. And myself, I've gained skills from living overseas and working for community organizations like proposal writing, grant acquisition. And I was doing those things for a while, and I thought, actually, that sort of development work's not for me. I want to sort of maybe try something else. I did fundraising, and I thought, oh, that's maybe not for me. And then I've done project management. And then I finally sort of got to program design and program management. And I thought, oh, this is where I really like. For me, it had a good balance of, community engagement. It had a good balance of my academic studies, all the project cycle management stuff. And so it really was almost a trial and error process to actually get where I am today. And it does take a long time. It can take, for my journey at least, it was kind of, a bit of unpaid work along the way, volunteering roles and such. So I guess throwing it back to you, Nora, this question. How did you know, I guess you're talking about all the range of experiences you gained throughout your developing your career, but how did you sort of end up knowing which area best suited you within this field?
Yeah, I guess I'm still figuring it out a bit.
Yeah, it's a lifelong.
Yeah, it's a long journey, and that's one thing I wanted to say, that it's not that direct what you want to do. Like I always keep saying that I know that at university, like the career advisors kept saying, like you need to have you need to know what you do and like build up your skill set and then achieve it. Like yes, but the goal might be something very different what you thought before. So open-mindedness is quite crucial. Like my first internship was with, maybe I go a bit back. So I knew that I'm very interested in different issues that society is facing. And I was quite focused on also like the issues that we have in Finland in the system and the social system, which is great. So I guess that wasn't enough issues for me enough maybe interest for me to think that that's something that I want to spend my life working towards. Like it was very clear for me that I like problem solving and I like to work hard. And I just felt that the atmosphere, what I was interested in Finland was too political. So that's why I started to work in the NGO sector. And little did I know that I ended up doing my first internship in South Africa for the Embassy of Finland. And that's when I understood that I don't want to work at the funder side. And who knows, maybe I end up working on that side. So at least I have this video in YouTube in future to remind myself that I said that once. But that's when I realized that this is probably not the side of development that I want to be on. I wanted to be on the side who's implementing the projects. And that was in the program that I was working on. I did my internship for. They had a consulting company who was actually implementing the project. And so that was the first time I was like, so this is what consultants do. So this is consulting company and they are doing actually development work. So that's how I got the idea. And then it was 6 years later that I ended up to this, like a private sector part of development. But yeah, I guess it was there that I was interested in social issues, and first in Finland, and then I kind of like it was more interesting in a global perspective. And then the little bits and pieces and the lucky coincidence that I ended up working in South Africa kind of underlined that, yes, this is what I want to be doing.
And I guess, Carl, to you, did you know you wanted to end up being a country director in Bangladesh?
Well, I was always interested in the sector, and through the sector, I guess I was always had these questions around, you know, how do different inequalities exist, inequities exist? What is, you know, how do different countries have different experiences in the ways that they, sorry, I'll just turn off that. Going in the background, hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, so questions around governance. How do you, you know, strengthen healthcare systems? How do you move beyond a conflict state into recovery, or after natural disasters into recovery? And a couple of really key things I think that I've learned along since my time of study is starting to think about how. Sorry, hold on a second. I'll just.
Yeah, no worries.
But I'll just.
There we are, perfect. That's it.
Yeah, so I think the thing for me as time has gone on is realizing just how complex the sector is, and how, you know, probably sort of 10 years ago when I started looking into this direction, it was far more about, you know, how can I be there in the field, you know, with people and interacting, and also now realizing as time's gone on that actually mostly, you know, these are local staff in these roles really at the coalface of the work, be that, you know, if it's in a clinic, it's and you're a nurse, your role as an international person is not actually in delivering the service, but maybe more of an upstream activity of providing some kind of technical standards or support, or more on the management side. And so my area of focus has become far more about how do you work with a lot of bureaucratic impediments. That's been a big challenge.
Big nod there, Danielle. Yeah.
So negotiating a bureaucratic environment, and where I am at the moment is a refugee context where you know, a host country, and as with many host countries in the world, doesn't necessarily want 1 million refugees who, you know, don't show much prospect of being able to return in the near future. That creates also a lot of internal political challenges for a developing country as well. So sort of negotiating and working within that space where there's an uncertain policy environment, or you have to kind of deal with challenges of corruption, or getting things done where, you know, implementing a project in a practical way might be one thing, but then you also face a lot of limitations at the governance level as well.
I think it's the phone. That's fine. Yeah, I'll let you go. I'll let you grab the phone. Throwing it to you, Sophie, I guess in terms of the cross-cultural, you've just come back from an internship in Israel and Palestine. The cross-cultural experience, what is that? I mean, we talk about studies, and then we talk about being involved with a range of different community organizations and different experiences throughout the world. What do you feel, and I think within that sphere of developing skills to be a development practitioner, is the experience of developing or going to other countries and sort of getting that cross-cultural experience. What do you feel like that has given to you personally and professionally, and as you sort of move on with your career?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. I feel like I'm obviously processing the trip, because it all became, you know, it was a whirlwind in itself, and then the very quick, all of a sudden, gapping out of, we were living in West Bank, and then we had to like gap across to Israel because they were closing the border, and you know, it all happened so fast at the end. So still unpacking some of that, but I think I actually had an expectation that it would be more difficult than it was. The cross-cultural kind of, I don't know, way we communicate and work together and that kind of thing. I actually found yeah, being there in the office, working with majority Palestinians, but a few Israelis as well, it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And I think, yeah, I think my posture has always been since, or trying to, we're not always perfect, but since I first got interested in international development and communications for development, I think, yeah, that lifelong learning posture is something that you've got to almost embrace. Otherwise, you'll just create a mess. So I think it was cool going in with that attitude of just wanting to learn from these local people and and kind of offer my skill set where I could, but also not wanting to, I don't know, try and come in the white savior complex and, you know, run everything myself or take things on in a way that wasn't sustainable. So I kind of found going in with that attitude made it kind of easy, and just knowing my role was for a short term to get stuck in, offer encouragement where I could, just be one part of like the bigger story. But I think it was probably an encouragement for me, being like actually going in with that learning posture is the best way to go about it. I learned so much from, you know, the local staff, who a lot of them became really good friends. So I don't know, for me it was maybe a bit of like a rose tinted experience, but it was awesome. I don't know still what like the absolute nugget of wisdom that it taught me, but I had fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said previously, I spent a year and a half in Papua New Guinea, and I talked about this at the second digital event IDYP hosted a few weeks back. And I mean, alongside my studies, it obviously grounded my studies within a real world context, and I was able to use all my academic skills, but it provides so much personal fulfillment and personal, I get so much confidence and all these different things. It's sort of indescribable to encapsulate what actually getting that sort of cross-cultural experience means and what it does to you personally, professionally. So I mean, I think that's another, as we talk about academic skills and everything, I think the gaining those cross-cultural skills and actually going and living in different countries is hugely important.
I have a question for Fran real quick. Fran, so I brought you on because I really wanted to have the perspective of someone who they didn't come into this traditionally. And I think it's really important for people to see that like you can kind of slip into this as well. And so what I'm curious about is, as you've gotten into international development more and you've gone overseas and you've worked on these projects, what are some skills or like learnings that you've picked up on that are maybe like unique to the sector that you've kind of realized coming from not in the sector?
Well, I think that cross-cultural thing applies for everyone, obviously. I mean, the hardest thing probably is clearly being female is often a negative in a lot of countries. So in Vietnam, I often have the problem that being a young female is not something that gives you a lot of authority. So you have to have a good team leader that gives you the ability to work. So they have to show the team over there that you do have the responsibilities and you have the skills to do it. So they have to enable you to do the work. So it's not just on you, it's on the whole team to enable you to do the work. I haven't had the pleasure to work in India, for example, but I imagine after having traveled there, and I'm married to an Indian, that that could be very challenging working in an environment like India where women are not fairly highly valued. So yeah, probably in the international world, being male can be beneficial, but we don't have the choice, so we have to power on even if we're not having that skill of being male. One of the things that we learn is if you have strong technical skills, they'll eventually believe you and follow what you have to say, but you have to probably work pretty hard to get them to believe in your abilities. And that was probably the hardest in the beginning, feeling like I have to always had the white old men tell them that yes, what she's saying is true, but if they say that often enough, probably it helps.
And I guess following on from, I guess, feeling like international development wasn't your natural state of what you studied or necessarily directed your life towards. And I think Sophie and Nora sort of touching on that, and Carl, in this sector, sort of the lifelong learning model is really beneficial to actually continually develop yourself. What are things you have developed since working in the sector that you feel has really helped you, alongside your scientific expertise, really helped you become a great practitioner, so to speak?
That's a really hard question, I think. I feel like I've gotten a lot better with time zones. I don't get so tired anymore. Traveling a lot really makes you more adaptable to change in time. I used to get really tired just from having the switch from summer to winter time and so forth. I'm not so bad at that anymore. And otherwise, I never had a real job before. So as is my first real full-time job, so I just had to learn everything. So I'm not sure there were any skills that I didn't pick up in this job that I have now. So everything was a steep learning curve. And I had never traveled to Asia before I took the job either. So everything was absolutely new. So
that's pretty incredible, actually. Yeah,
there were not a lot of skills I had before besides the technical background that I applied to the job. So.
I guess just touching on Farhan's question in the chat, could you allude to any skills or knowledge that you think are required for this area of work, or that you see as imperative to anyone wanting to develop the skill set to get into the sector? Yeah, Fran, I'll throw it.
Well, anything you learn beforehand is helpful, I think. I mean, just as somebody said earlier, just knowing where to look and having the background knowledge and applying that practically is really what it's all about. People are going to ask you questions you've no clue about, and people are going to expect you to know technical knowledge that you just don't have. But if you're honest and say, I don't know, but I will follow up, or that's something we have to revisit next time, or just, yeah. I don't know. I feel like I have quite often get to the limits of my knowledge and I'll just have to follow up on it. And I'm not sure there's a lot of skills I can tell you have to do the job in international development, besides possibly being flexible and not getting offended if somebody makes you feel like you've done something really dumb, or if you feel like you're not valued. I think it's just important to be open-minded and be able to sometimes think on your feet.
Yeah, I think just to add there, Matt, it's quite interesting hearing everybody speak, because it's such a broad and diverse sector. And I think a few times in our events, the question tends to come up, what is international development? And it can be such a broad, diverse field, and it can mean different things to different people. And I think from the more that I hear people's stories, there actually is no traditional route to get into this field. And given the Sustainable Development Goals, which apply to everyone, business, public sector, NGOs, sustainable development and international development is kind of sometimes the goal of lots of very different organizations, and requires a raft of different skill sets and knowledge and expertise. Just my background as well, I currently work for an NGO, the Fred Hollows Foundation New Zealand, which is an eye care charity in working in the Pacific Islands. But the biggest kind of pinpoint on my journey to this point, where I was always interested in social change and wanting to get involved in kind of, like Carl touched on, trying to understand why there are inequalities in the world, why is there poverty. And I just always wanted to work for an organization which was really, its core purpose was in that space. But the best advice someone gave me was just to study what I was interested in, what I felt I was good at, and I would eventually end up in a space that was an organization contributing to good change. And that can be a private sector, it can be an NGO, it can be, that's how that really changed it for me, because it wasn't, the sector kind of doesn't need just it needs a whole variety of people, I guess, is what my biggest learning on this journey has been as well.
Yeah, and I will sort of say, I mean, as I've said previously, a lot of the IDYP members and the last few events we've had have been people, I guess, younger people wanting to get into the sector and break into it. So really any questions people have that are present here that want to really direct questions at the four panelists we have, just to ask them questions about any personal questions about how they got into it, what they feel about the sector, anything like that, just to direct us a bit more would be great. But also pivoting from the pathways into development, and then we can, and then sort of addressing the actual sector itself. What are the sort of hidden challenges or the things you kind of don't necessarily know about development, and the challenges that hide within the sector? Because for me personally, it's a pretty disruptive lifestyle, I suppose. It's a lot of travel. You sort of, that can disrupt personal relationships and so on. So I guess throwing it to you, Carl, living in Bangladesh, what does that mean for you personally, and how has that, I guess, influence how you think about your life?
Yeah, really good question, and I think it's something that will be really different for different people. I know for my organization, they do a lot around like resilience profiling before deploying staff overseas. And I remember my answers to it as being that if I can get outside and have some fresh air and coffee, then those are two of my like coping mechanisms, both of which have been really quite challenging under lockdown when, you know, the supply chain is disrupted and ability to go outside is challenged. So I think it kind of underlines that you know, whatever situation you go into can also end up something that's very different to what you expect. So taking away any assumptions or expectations, you could say sort of setting the bar low, and then there's no real surprises that it doesn't live up to the expectations of what you would like. As you know, those are a couple of tips or things that I found to be quite useful. Time zones, someone's already mentioned, it does play a big role. Being able to connect with family and friends. You know, I thought actually being somewhere with a 6-hour time difference to New Zealand would be, you know, more practical than being somewhere with a close to 12-hour time difference. But on the other hand, actually it kind of means that whether it's before work, at lunchtime, or at the end of the day, you know, don't really align that well with the time zone in New Zealand. So those are sort of minor considerations, but they actually do play or can play a larger role depending on your personal situation. So yeah, just thinking through some of those details of what is it that you feel that you need. Is it also, I've worked as the only international staff within a team of national staff. Fantastic, I really enjoyed it, but it also does bring its challenges as well. So is it, you know, working within a team with other internationals to an extent as well? Is that something that you find it easier to live and get by in that environment? So, you know, all different things play a subconscious stress or have a mental toll in some kind of way. So just finding the right balance and fit for both your personality and for how long you're thinking to be overseas, I think are both a couple of things I would highlight.
Yeah, that, I mean, the idea of self-care and your organization really looking after you as an employee and as well as a person within a developing nation, if you're situated there, is really a big thing, and it's been highlighted within the development sector the last few years, and there's a lot more emphasis has been given towards that self-care sort of mandate within the sector. I guess to you, Nora, anything working within the private sphere of development, I mean, you touched on the bureaucracy and everything that comes with that, but any sort of challenges or frustrations that have arisen?
I think many of the frustrations are same than in the NGO sector. I think one thing is field work. What was already mentioned by Carl and Sophie, that when you haven't done any work in the field yet, you have this kind of a idea that you're gonna be in the community and talking with the people and you're gonna be helping, and you really have this idea really hands-on. Then you go to the field, like I was working at this point, it wasn't anymore a surprise, but I was working in Kathmandu in Nepal for 7 months previous year. And yeah, I was in Kathmandu. And the biggest difference from doing the work was that I was at the office, which didn't have an air conditioning, and it was really, really hot. And then a few months later, really, really cold. And at some point, it was frustrating. And not that I was anymore expecting like any luxury, but you know, just it wasn't anymore like a field work what I could have had in my head many years ago, that you go to the communities like, yes, that is part of the work, but it's not even what you're supposed to be doing in the country. Like if you want to work in the development sector, it's not you who should be in the communities giving workshops about, I don't know, community-based disaster risk management. It should be the people from the country who know the context. Like, yeah, you should have a role and you can have a role. And especially if you're telling stories, that's really interesting, that, and you need to be understanding the people there. But I think that's one of the biggest, like I think you were describing them like a hidden facts that kind of came up when you started to work. Like field work doesn't necessarily mean that you are in the community engaging. It can mean that you're sitting at the office in Bangladesh and being locked in there. That's field work in a way. And then another one is probably the frustration. Like, you know, things will be slow and you know things don't always work out and you're frustrated and you read about this beforehand, and if you tell somebody, you probably get an advice like, yeah, but that's how it is and you need to be dealing and you need to understand other cultures. But nothing prepares you to the level of frustration when things don't work out, no matter what you do. And sometimes things work so well and sometimes they just don't, no matter what you do. And that's something that probably people who are working in this field are very used to, being frustrated and that things are out of your hands. Just processes take ages, which you wouldn't expect to take ages. And then another thing that I was probably a bit more surprised that I thought beforehand is the negative attitudes that you sometimes face. And negative, I mean that people see you as a dollar sign when you're walking. Like I remember in Nepal and in some other projects I work also in the Philippines, like you're directly asked like, well, if we need that, why cannot you just fund it? And both of these experiences that I was referring to, I was working as a volunteer without any funding in this country. So I didn't have many dollars in my pocket. I needed to, obviously I was in a very privileged position that I can afford a flight to go to that country and work there as a volunteer. So that means already, but that was probably something that was a bit heartbreaking every now and then, that the people's attitudes towards you that I faced, that, yeah, I'm here thinking that I'm kind of included, but then every now and then I hear something, I'm like, oh no, I'm a dollar sign in this conversation. But yeah, I think those things are something that I've noticed during my few years in this sector.
I guess in relation to the upheaval of the world that's going on at the moment, how does the development world and sector feel in terms of job security?
For me?
Does it feel like a secure industry to be a part of? And
yeah, very good question. It's in a way, yes, that I think there will always be a place for this type of work. And like, there was a good question about like, what is this type of work, what is development? And it's an endless process. There's always something to be developed and something to be achieved. So I think that probably the sector will be changing a lot, where the focus will be, but there will be always need for like capacity moving from another place to another and like distributing things more equally. So I think that's a big role what international development sector does. It's like distributing kind of capacity in terms of like resources, like human resources and actual physical resources. So I think that the need won't go anywhere. I would like to see a world when that's not anymore, but yeah, probably less jobs, but more work. I would say that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean the classic thing is, I mean, if we do our jobs right, we should put ourselves out of a job. Ultimately, is what we envision for our sector. And I guess throwing it back to you, Carl, in terms of the mandate of international development mandate of nationalizing jobs and localization, how do you feel like the role of the expat plays within the developing world currently?
I think it's definitely in a time of change, and I agree with Nora that I think there's always a place for international development, and that won't change. But the roles and nature of that, I think, will change over time. So yeah, like I know a lot of organizations are seeing localization as decentralizing. So a lot of large international organizations moving their international capacity into regional offices. I think it's something we're going to grapple with in the sector for a long time, because also I have seen in the context where I'm working that local organizations are not broad-based civil society organizations, but many represent almost a personal business of the founder who has started them up. So, you know, on a country by country basis, that's going to look very different in different places. But ultimately, what is the end goal of localization, and who is it serving? I think is an important question to ask. And then flowing out from that, you know, how is the sector shaped, and what are the kinds of expertise and involvement? But the more that we can be collaborative and not have the divides between, you know, local, national, and international organizations and institutional donors, but you know, see a lot more knowledge sharing and networking and collaboration between all of those different types of actors. I think each seems to play a role in its own area. Many more local actors have those well-established community relationships and have been there a long time, but they may be far outside national capitals, and many of their staff may not have, you know, educations in technical areas, and can really draw on the private sector or international or national organizations who can complement what they're doing with that, with those skill sets as well. And then obviously the links to the international resources as well, which is often the place of international staff, be that from Western countries or others, but there is far more kind of collaboration or crossover that's, I think, will be enabled in the coming years. So I'm hopeful.
Perfect. I see Farhan. Do you want to use your mic, or do you just mean in the chat? I have a question to the panelists.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Good evening.
Yes. Yeah. Good evening to you. I have a question to the panelists, and my question is: working with international development is inevitably stressful in physical, thinking, emotional, and behavioral, and influence the appetite and performance of the person. If like this situation is happening to each one of you, what makes you to keep the momentum and motivates you, and how do you reconcile and manage this stress? Can you hear me well? Or
yes,
can
yeah,
I
no,
write to the
good
chat?
question.
Yeah.
Great question. Can I pass that question to you, Fran, if you got it fully?
Well, I don't know if I covered fully, but I mean, my situation is probably a bit different to Carl's, because we do more fly-in, fly-out type work. So I usually only stay about a week or two in a country, and then I come back, or I jump between countries. So that is definitely stressful sometimes. And well, different food and different water sources and stuff mess with your system quite often too. I was just talking about that with someone, and well, the countries we work in, Carl is nodding, there's quite often the food is not necessarily the cleanest, so I try to stay away from food that would make me sick, but every so often it does happen, so that is definitely stressful. And yeah, being away from home obviously isn't great for your social and private life quite often. There was one of the questions in the list that I thought was quite funny, because it was like, does it have a negative influence on you, or a negative effect on your social life? And I wanted to join a team sport of some form, and then I realized that's really not very fair to the team, because half the time you're not around, so that's not really a good thing to do. So yeah, it is stressful, and what we do is, well, we feel like we do great work, so it really makes up for the fact that it's stressful sometimes. At least that's for me the case. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's and that's something that, I mean, living in PNG for a year and a half, and you sort of living in countries and putting yourself through a lot of, I guess, I mean, taking yourselves out of your current situation, putting yourselves in a very foreign context is immediately challenging, and probably something that isn't, I mean, it's never really, you can never really prepare yourself for it necessarily. And it's something that just needs to be, I think, within the development sector, just continuously talked about. And that's where it comes back to Carl's sort of self-care and looking after yourself. And I mean, I know in my times overseas, there's moments of struggling and things like that. And it is about having the perspective of the work you're achieving, what you're doing, and so on. But I guess, Sophie, in regards to Farhan's question, how did you cope with the mental, physical, emotional stress of living in Israel and Palestine?
Was that the, I just want to clarify, Farhan, that was the question? How is it for us going to overseas countries? Or was it putting ourselves in local people's shoes? I just want to clarify. Unless he's gone.
Hello. Yes. Yes. I am talking about how, and I'm talking about in international wise, while you are working to outside your home country.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. How is it, right? How is it for us working outside our home country? Yeah. So again, mine was 6 months, which I feel like, you know, still actually feels very short compared to other people living overseas for longer. But I think for me, I found it, just very personally, I found it really helpful. A friend of mine before I went overseas, he kind of knows the political situation a lot better than I did before I left about Israel-Palestine and the conflict there. And he just gave me some great advice that I found really helpful. And he said, whenever you feel, and you will feel this, overwhelmed by the situation over there, politically, socially, and all of that, just try and view the situation through the relationships that you build with people. And I personally find that whole micro, macro way of thinking helped me to not be overwhelmed. And because I think particularly there, and, you know, in this time as well, with a lot of factors, like even the big calls that Trump has been making, calling illegal Israeli settlements legal and Jerusalem is the capital, and, you know, there's lots going on. The overall situation can feel quite hopeless with regards to steps forward to peace. But I found that whenever I was talking with one person or one community group who were part of these reconciliation groups and were taking steps to address their own prejudice and change themselves and their families and, you know, the communities from the bottom up, that's where I found kind of hope to continue on. So for me, that was probably the most helpful thing. To keep my head screwed on straight and not become overwhelmed, was just viewing everything through the one person and the relationships around me. Was most helpful. And also to have fun. I think, like, it was good to, you know, just have times where you kick back and go to bingo nights with your local friends and smoke shisha, and, you know, like, it was good to know as well, you're allowed to, like, kick back. You don't have to be just like this full angsty, woke, social justice young adult all the time. So it was, a few things like that.
Sweet. I mean, being a social protection analyst, you said, Farhan, can you provide us with any insights in your work in Somaliland and how you deal with these issues? Unmuting, or? That's all right. Otherwise, I want to throw anything out to any other questions to the field, or anyone else have any questions for the panelists? There's no point.
I wanted to quickly respond. I had a quite interesting experience in Nepal. So I was based in Kathmandu, and we had in a southern Nepal, in a Terai region, we had a project, and I said I want to go there. It was like designing a project and talking with the local NGO. It was about people with disabilities and building some opportunities for them. And I was really excited. Like, I want to get to the field. I want to live in this part of Nepal for a few weeks at least, or like visit there. And like, I was thinking I'm going to be more in the community. And when I arrived, I had Googled that there was one hotel, but no one helped me. So I was like, I will just go and knock the door. I'm sure it will be fine. So this driver drops me, takes my bag out of the car. And then there's like at least 50 Nepali men standing there. There's a huge event in that hotel, which was, hotel is a lot to say. It was a building. And everybody was staring and like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I don't know either. And then the driver was like, I'm going now. And the driver left. I was like, wow, I'm 2 weeks here before he comes back. And I don't even have a room to stay. And finally found a room and went in and locked the door and was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I've been in places and I've traveled a lot, and this wasn't my first time in abroad, but I was terrified. And I was like asking myself, what am I afraid of? Why am I terrified? And like, because I don't trust people. But why don't I trust them? Because I don't know anybody. And I kind of like calm myself down that, okay, like, you need to get to know people. So I got out, then I started to talk with the hotel owner who told me where can I get some food. And by the end of the week, I had so many friends. I wasn't scared anymore. People were so friendly. Like when I went to a store, people wanted to like just follow you everywhere, and they were just very interested. And I felt really guilty in the end, like about my initial feeling when I came, that I was terrified. Whereas I was like assuming beforehand that it would be, oh great, I'm going to be living in this community, but I didn't really have the idea that I might be having those feelings. And I think that's what I want to say, that it's okay to also allow yourself that you can be scared. But for me, it was that I didn't trust people, and I didn't trust them because I didn't know anybody. But once I built that relationship, what Sophie was talking about, like really grow into those relationships that you have and remember them. And yeah, and I loved my 2 weeks in this tiny little place in Nepal. Learned so much more than in Kathmandu.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the healthy thing, like taking care of yourself and reconciling the stresses. And I think it's really important to build up and keep good habits while you're overseas and while you're doing this work, and don't just drop them because like you're in this exciting new place. Like still do your yoga and still talk to people and set boundaries. Like a friend will probably laugh. We have this guy at work who's like super talkative and like is such an extrovert. And every time I travel with him, like I have to be really clear that like some nights I just need like the night to myself, because I don't have the capacity or the brain space to like hang out with him every single night just because we're like in this new environment. So like making sure that you keep those same boundaries when you're overseas as when you're in New Zealand.
Anyway, any other questions from everyone? Any other inclusions from the panelists? I mean, I don't really have too many more questions on the list of questions, but we could almost, Danielle and Jade, and any other inclusions with IDYP matters?
I maybe wanted to add one quick point that I have written to myself to say. That is a very important thing to remember, to not be too picky with your experiences at the beginning. When you get out of uni and you have some opportunities, just take them. It might not be the opportunity that will be defining the rest of your career. Like first job for me in New Zealand when I came was with Breast Cancer Foundation. And I'm not a cancer expert. I was working with a fundraising team. I didn't realize before I got the job how much I would be learning. And so just maybe that I wanted to say that just remember that there's so many skills that you get out of the jobs that you didn't know that you would be getting. But if you say no to all those opportunities, you will never get them. So yeah, don't be picky.
And that's totally something I sort of reconciled, or had to sort of go through myself with my own journey within development, and about the opportunities I was getting and whether they were the right fit. And I think in this day and age with the millennial generation, we're exposed to everyone else's successes, and we can see everyone doing incredible looking things and they look like the perfect opportunities. And I was, in regards to my getting an opportunity to go to PNG, I was thinking to myself, is this the right move? Is this the best fit for my professional development? And is this going to get me where I want? And I was I was only 23 or something. I was a child, and I mean, I'm still young, but you know, I was thinking in this thing of everything had to be this perfect fit for my career moving forward, and everything had to be a progression. And so I got caught up in this whole professional development mindset. And I think with development, there can be a capacity, especially in the early stages of your career when you might be doing a lot of internships or volunteer work, just to take experiences as well as professional development as is, and those personal experiences and will develop you sort of, personally as well as professionally. Is there anything to add, Carl? Or?
Yeah, I was just reflecting a bit on what Sophie was saying about storytelling, and also on the, living overseas realities, and reflecting on my experience here. So as international staff, I'm living with an Ethiopian, a Kenyan, a Frenchman, and a Malaysian here in Bangladesh, among Bangladeshis. And so we kind of, although coming from very different cultures, we actually come together and sort of create, a third culture in a sense, based on different things from here and there. So it's really nice to be able to find that those periods to relax by just coming together and watching a movie or cooking a meal together. And I find that that's a really good way, a coping mechanism of managing in a very different environment. But also touching on the storytelling aspect is, and the question that Lauren has asked in the chat is that my role basically is a lot of coordination meetings and access negotiations. I tend to hear a lot about what are the staff issues, what are the access issues, what are the things which aren't going well. And so to be able to actually link up with our field communications officer and hear what he's been experiencing talking with people, and hear these amazing stories which I don't always get to see and hear, because often my focus is going somewhere to have a specific focus and discuss this or that. But his role is really just going and sitting with people for hours on end and hearing their whole story. And so those are the things that really motivate me when I actually hear what is the outcome of all of this, and what is the work which is going on. So I think it's something that we ourselves can do as well, as make that time and do it intentionally to not have an agenda or a list of things to achieve when going out and speaking with people, but to just sit and listen. And those are some of the best insights that I've had from people, and ideas on how to do things differently or better, is just by stopping and listening.
Can I also add a cheeky final note?
Yep.
I think when you were talking before about different ways of experience or things people can learn that can help along the journey, as the token marketing person or comms for development person working with programs teams, one of the most helpful things that we got recommended to do by the head of programs at the time in marketing was to go to this course called The Common Cause. And so I'm just thinking, for anyone who works in NGOs or teams where you've got programs people and communications people working together, I totally recommend you just shout it from the rooftops for people to go along to this, because it's forming communication strategies from a values-based approach. For anyone, some people might have heard of it before, but it kind of talks about how there's different values that either promote or inhibit people, like empathy and people to be motivated to take social action. And it's kind of just looking from a different angle, I guess, at how we do marketing and how we tell stories of the work happening in the field and with our partners or with these local communities. Because I think, like Carl was saying, when a story is told well, and it kind of again highlights the complexities of the situations and the different always evolving development strategies, and is told from a values-based approach, it can be something that is motivating and doesn't have to kind of create this disparity between marketing and development. I believe in the ideals that we can work together. So I would say that. And then also for people, if you are finding you're wanting to find ways to bridge marketing and development, is a website called ethicalstorytelling.com. And it's got awesome like podcasts and resources, and you can also sign their pledge to tell stories ethically, and there's more information about what that means. But it's another thing that I just encourage people who are in the marketing space within development to sign on to that as well. Thanks, Danielle.
Awesome. Yeah, throwing yourself out there, putting yourself in just new positions to gain opportunities is so important in this sort of sector. And there'll never necessarily in the early stages of a career be a perfect opportunity. It's just about throwing yourself out there and really getting involved in sort of as many things as you are passionate about. It comes down ultimately to what you actually care about, because then you're going to obviously follow through with things. It's not just about telling people you do good socially, it's about actually wanting to do it, which is an important distinction, I think. Otherwise, any other questions from anyone? I don't have any else. Any other last points from the panelists? I think that question is a pretty good one from Lauren to sort of end on. What makes everything worthwhile? And I mean, that's a very nice question. And it's a good one to, I think, people within the sector to reflect on and yeah, I guess Nora's answer, making a difference is sort of actually kind of, you'd hopefully everyone shares that same sentiment, but I guess, sorry, Nora, you go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say, and it doesn't necessarily mean the difference that you personally did, but like something that your organization did and you were part of it. So people shouldn't be thinking like, me, myself, and I want to be seeing what I did, and then I want to take credit out of that. Like, no, that's exactly how it doesn't work. It's just a bigger difference that every now and then you realize, like, wow, I was part of that, and it actually happened. And I want to say that, like, I've met the most amazing people during my work and travels and life abroad. Like, it was quite recently, I had my own wedding, and we have 16 different nationalities at the wedding. Just because, yeah, I have had an amazing opportunities to be around the world, and yeah, it was like one moment kind of seeing it all in front of you, like, wow, I have so many amazing people in my life because the career that I chose.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else, Jade or Danielle or Elena? Any IDYP or any other questions to our panelists?
I was going to say that I always feel that in international development, you kind of get more out of it than you put in. I mean, a lot of it is just the cross-cultural bridging of, different values and stuff like that. And I always feel like the more you travel and the more you go around, you do these things, like I just get so much out of these projects that we do. And obviously, like, we put in a lot of technical expertise as a science organization, but like just coming out of like Vietnam and like learning how they handle things, and how like if you can't raise your voice, you can't get angry, you can't show any signs of anger, or they will not deal with you. And like having to like adjust, like as an American who's very blunt and in your face, to like be doing a bit more subtle, and you learn those things, and you learn the value of like not always being direct as well. I think that as an American especially, like we have this idea that, oh, direct is the best way to do it because there's no misconfusion, but like you kind of understand that, like, there is value of doing it a different way as you go to different countries and go around. So yeah, what about the other panelists? What do you guys think? What is it that you get out of this? Go on, Fran.
I was thinking really bluntly, it's a job. It pays the bills. That was one of the important things when I started. I needed a job, so it happened to be a really cool one, but it was also really important that there was a paycheck in the end of the month. And yeah, it's nice to feel like you're doing good, but it's also nice to know that somebody pays your wage in the end of the month. I don't know, that sounds maybe very
definitely, and
American, but
and I think there is a note to there is a point to make that, I mean, within the development sector, you can actually make quite a bit of money. I mean, there's money involved with consultancies and for people to get paid money. So it's obviously you do it for a social good, but there is, there are means to actually support yourself pretty well and comfortably. Especially, if you're an expat living in a developing country, you can get paid pretty good salaries usually and things like that.
And not in America, you will not make any money on this sector at all. It's real bad pay.
Okay, I didn't. Good to know.
And
Carl?
not all the not all the consulting work make you rich. Just wanted to add that point.
Yes. No. Yes.
Getting rich from this job, but it does pay a wage, so that's the part. It's not by no means it's like any other scientist, but it's just nice to have a paycheck in the end of the week.
That's a really interesting reflection as well, because there is a perception, I would say, in New Zealand about the NGO sector being kind of one that's quite low paid and difficult to raise funds. Yet in many of the countries that we work, it's seen as the big cash cow, the sector which has a lot of money and can spend up large. So really interesting, I think, with working with national staff, and sometimes they get asked questions about, what motivates you for this job, and I had a nurse who said very honestly, she said, well, it's I needed a job, it pays well, and working conditions are pretty good, and so it supports my family, and that's why I do it. And I think that it's also worth keeping in mind that that's a perfectly legitimate reason for people doing the work that they do. And while we may have a really kind of values changing society take on it, for many people supporting their family is a very value-based judgment as well, and something that's really worthy to mention.
Yeah, but it can almost lead you to be a better practitioner, to not go in with thinking that you can go save the world because you came in with perfect values. Going into it with thinking it's a job, like, it makes you more objective, I think. So good point there.
Right. So yeah, I think this is time to wrap up, unless any last questions. Jade, Anna, anything to add? All good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say thanks so much to all the panelists. It was really awesome just to hear your open, honest answers, and it's always really interesting to hear your stories. So thanks so much for making the time and for sharing with us.
And I'll note, Danielle's just posted in the chat the feedback link. So we really do like that feedback. So if you can take the time to fill that out,
so we can monitor and evaluate our work.
Yeah, but M&E, just getting that skill set up, as we do. That's what this whole exercise is for, IDYP. But yeah, thanks, Carl. Thanks, Nora. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, Fran. Really great insights. And I mean, for me personally, it was kind of a cheeky way of talking with people and actually getting an insight into what other professionals are doing for myself, so I can actually reflect on what I do and try and get better at my job and gain more skills and everything. So it's been a good way for me to learn as well. And I hope everyone else has gotten a few tidbits out of it. So thanks everyone, and ka kite.
And thank you.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
Jade,
Have a good
Danielle.
evening.
Cheers.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you so much.